Hello and welcome to the ninth and very final installment of our AI for Business livestream series from ThoughtBot. I'm your host Ferdia and I'm a senior product designer here at ThoughtBot. If you've made it this far, thank you so much for sticking with the series and for all your questions and feedback. They're much appreciated and I hope it's been useful and that you've it started to knit together for you a little bit. For anyone that's joining the series for the first time, this series is a little bit different to our other AI in Focus series with Chad. Those streams cover working with AI in a lot more detail. They get much deeper into the technical applications and the technical side of things. For these kind of series of streams, we just try to keep it quite light. So there's no real heavy technical definitions or coding or anything like that. And we try to keep each stream to around 30 minutes, so it'll be hopefully nice and short each week. Finally, just as I make this disclaimer at the start of every stream, when we're talking about AI for the purposes of this stream, we're using that phrase AI in a very, very broad sense. It's a bit of an umbrella term, quite a loose definition, a bit of a catch-all. But for our purposes here, it keeps things simple and just helps us stay focused on the outcomes rather than the sort of technical aspects or the technical minutiae, and that is the purpose of this series. So let's just have a look again at the overview of what the series has covered so far. So in previous streams in the series, we talked about the history of AI and how we can harness that. And then we looked at three areas where AI can be really beneficial right now. So that's your AI and automation. Oh, sorry, connection dropped slightly there for a second. But yeah, we looked at three areas where AI can be useful right now. So that's your automation, your cognitive insight, and your cognitive engagement. And then after that, we looked at whether you should go big or go home with your adoption of AI. So whether you should be picking an evolutionary approach where you layer it into your existing processes, or where you try to pick a revolutionary one and you make big bold changes to your processes with AI. And then in the last couple of streams, we covered two related topics about adoption challenges that you might face. And those can be from within your organization, with your people and with your team, trying to get people on board. And they can also be external challenges, then kind of legal and societal and sort of ethical things that you need to consider. If you haven't watched those streams previously, all the recordings are on YouTube, and I would recommend watching them back and following along in order is probably the best way to get this stuff to kind of tie all together a little bit better. But you can also watch them independently. There should still be some benefit in kind of doing that. This week we're moving on to our very final topic, which is implementation strategy. Okay, so this is kind of for your AI project, how you're going to roll that out. So as I said, this is the very last stream in this series. Give yourself a pat on the back for making it this far if you've stuck it out all the way through. And yeah, as I said, in this final week, we're going to look at kind of how you roll out your new AI strategy. And kind of the good news for this week for product managers and business folk is that this one is going to feel a lot more familiar to you all. Okay, it's less about the AI; it's more about kind of how you roll that stuff out. So basically to get things started, we have the research phase, and the genesis of any AI powered digital transformation is this research phase. So our live streams and the accompanying blog series, which I'll link in the notes on YouTube to that blog series, but they focus specifically on this phase. So just to kind of recap, after the series, you should be in a position basically to write a report or create an analysis or kind of do present something to your team or to your company that'll answer questions like what is the problem we're trying to solve, and within that you might be able to answer like, are we diagnosing the problem correctly? Are we focusing on the right problem? So making sure that we're solving the actual problem that we need to solve. How do we define success for this problem that we're working on? And then how do we measure success as well? So what are our KPIs in relation to that? So that's kind of the problem focused parts. We should also, at the end of this research phase, be able to answer questions around where does AI fit in with our existing processes. So can we use cognitive robotic process automation or cognitive RPA to automate any of the steps in our existing process? And can we use cognitive insights to improve a process? So again, that's deriving value and insights from large data sets that will be quite hard to pick actionable insights out of. Can we use cognitive engagement to improve a process? And then should we even be improving existing processes, or is there an opportunity to make a kind of a bold move and to reinvent how we do things? You should also be able to answer questions around, do the changes actually help us? So again, do they drive us towards our definition of success, and do they add value to customers? That's kind of a core part of all the streams so far. Your AI kind of transformation should be providing value to your customers. That's where the focus should be. We should also know as well what data do we need to take action. So do we have the data required to take the actions we want to take? And if we don't, is it worth trying to gather that data? How will we go about collecting it to set us up for success in future? We should also be able to answer some questions around our organizational structure and our culture. So does that kind of help or hinder AI implementation? So is kind of AI, is our planned use of AI, is that aligned to the company vision? Because that'll help get your team on board if it is. Do we need to improve our communication or our transparency or our training for our team to make the best use of AI? Is our priority by bringing in AI, is it going to be income growth, which is preferable, rather than expense reduction? But what's our balance there between the two? And where are we kind of as an organization, maybe in the Gartner AI maturity model? And then finally, again, you should be able to answer questions around like, what is the implication, or what is the impact or the implications here for customers, for your employees, for society as a whole? And then kind of whether there are any sort of legal or ethical considerations that your specific business needs to be aware of. And we looked at some examples last week in the EU AI Act, how some businesses will fall under stricter regulations than others. So those are things you might need to consider. So as I said, these explorations, kind of these questions, They begin, but they're not exclusive or exhaustively explored in this live stream series. So if you followed the entire series along, pretty much all of these things should feel somewhat familiar to you, and you should have some background information on them at least. You should kind of challenge your team by asking these types of questions before proceeding with your AI implementation. As I say, the research phase is the first part of it, so you want to get that down before you start jumping into and actually trying to bring it on board. All of these questions that I just went through there in the slides, they're all listed in the accompanying blog for this live stream, which again I'll link in the notes on YouTube. But yeah, asking these questions early will help you identify whether AI is appropriate and worth the investment for your organization at an early stage before you incur kind of too many costs. And that's obviously beneficial in case you need to pivot or make tweaks as you go. So trying to get answers to these questions upfront and early is very beneficial. And we'll cover a little bit more on that point later on in the slides as well. So after your research phase, it's then kind of time for a little bit of maybe cost benefit analysis. You probably have some good ideas now at this point of how you think AI can help your company. And yeah, the next thing is to investigate whether the proposed change is affordable. So again, you need to conduct some follow-up research specifically on kind of the cost involved. This is my apologies, folks. I seem to be having the gremlins attacking my connection today. I hope it hasn't caused too much disruption. Let me just get my screen back up here. Yeah, so again, this portion, when we're looking at kind of the cost benefit side of things, and we'll be looking to answer changes around can we afford this change, and then similarly, can we afford not to make the change? So can we stay competitive even if we don't make this change? We might want to try to answer questions around like, is it possible to estimate the development costs for each stage? Are there existing tools out there that we can leverage, maybe that'll make this kind of cheaper? So can these tools reduce our implementation costs, or maybe they can reduce our operational costs as well? And then can we treat kind of AI as a general tool rather than getting tied to a specific provider? And because, if you get tied to a specific provider and they increase their prices, that's going to have a knock-on impact and you're kind of locked in with them. So some of these questions are fairly easy to answer, like researching the existing tools. That should be fairly straightforward. You've got others then around kind of like estimating development costs from the outset. That can be a lot more tricky to do. We've got lots of resources on the TopBot blog kind of covering that topic, how we try to estimate or why estimates can be difficult or maybe not even worth it. I'm going to link to this one from Amanda in the stream notes, just to kind of get you started. But as I said, there's a lot of good blogs from TopBot out there that will cover this topic. Okay, so then once you've got your research phase, your cost benefit analysis, and now if both of those basically are demonstrating that your AI project is a viable one, it's time then for an iterative rollout process. So this is like your pilot studies, your minimum viable products, that kind of thing. We're probably back on familiar turf here for a lot of folks watching these streams. So basically, no matter what label you use, you should take an iterative approach to your rollout. So if you begin kind of with a pilot study or an MVP, it allows you to validate the assumptions that you've made prior to a broader phased rollout. And again, that's great for reducing costs and kind of making sure you hit the mark when you bring it out. And again, we have lots of top up blogs on this subject, so I won't labor the point too much here. But yeah, in short, each part of the project should be broken down into these kind of smaller phases, smaller steps, and they're a bit more manageable. After a small scale test release, each part should then be assessed against our goals and our KPIs. So those are the things we set very early on in this process, and what we want to see is at the end of this. And then if they're demonstrating value and it gets close to our goal, it can then be rolled out further. But if not, then we need to kind of peel it back, iterate on it again before we roll that out to kind of the broader market. And again, this approach, it reduces risks and costs. So you won't spend ages like building something that ultimately doesn't work for the market and kind of sucking up all those costs involved with that. So yeah, an iterative rollout improves your odds of achieving product market fit and delivering customer value, which has obviously been a central pillar of all these streams so far. And if you're not delivering customer value with your AI project, it probably won't succeed as even if you do an iterative release. But an iterative release should hopefully help you get there a little bit more easily. So to demonstrate kind of what I mean by this kind of incremental rollout, for the very last time in the series, we're going to revisit our delectable AI-powered and entirely fictitious side business, and this is Thought Burgers, which is home to the tastiest and most kind of thought-provoking burgers. To date in this series, we looked at how Thought Burgers is planning to use AI to speed up deliveries to millions of hungry customers during rush hour. So deliveries are taking too long. We want to use AI kind of to help us get our rush hour deliveries to customers more quickly. We looked at how automation and then cognitive insight and then cognitive engagement could be applied to make our current delivery process, which is what you see in the boxes here, how we can make that current delivery process better. This covered kind of everything from automated and sort of improved delivery driver scheduling and route optimization to kind of more effective triaging of delivery orders between different restaurant branches that are kind of in the same area. So our rollout for this strategy could look kind of something like this, right? So we start, maybe our first step is to use robotic process automation, not cognitively enhanced, just regular RPA, to automate steps 1, 2, and 3 here. So this is kind of around the delivery manager scheduling our drivers. And we might do that in one particular test branch. Okay, so we start off with one here. If this proves successful in the testing branch, as defined again by our KPIs and the goals that we had previously set, then we can begin to roll it out to other branches in kind of London or nearby that branch. And if the change continues to show promise, so it's working in those other branches as well, then we can roll it out to our other London branches and maybe to Thought Burger branches further afield, in other cities, Brighton, Manchester, Newcastle, and maybe even into Ireland or mainland Europe or wherever our branches are. Okay, so we're kind of making sure that things that the changes we're making will deliver success. Then we roll out to a slightly larger scale, make sure it delivers success there, and then you can kind of do your full rollout. Now, while this kind of regular RPA rollout is underway in those other branches, our test branch could kind of try to start looking at upgrading the system to cognitive RPA. So now it's starting to leverage AI to allow the system to learn over time. We did mention this before in the stream specifically about AI and automation, that this might be overkill in this particular example, but we're just going to go with it just to kind of explain the point, basically. So again, let's assume that the introduction of cognitive RPA is kind of supercharging our regular RPA with AI. It shows that it can deliver value in this testing branch, as again defined by our KPIs. So begin a phase rollout then to our other branches again. And then while this rollout is occurring, maybe our test branch might kind of start moving on to the next phase, which is around order triaging. So how we're assigning orders to the branch. And for this one, they're going to be looking at implementing cognitive insights. So trying to kind of use lots of data around, availability, kitchen capacity, stock, driver availability, traffic conditions, all this stuff, to better kind of assign which branch an order should be going to. So maybe in this case, our test branch, while that other cognitive RPA rollout is happening nationwide and across our other branches, maybe our test branch starts kind of teaming up with just a couple of other sort of central London-based branches to start experimenting with using cognitive insights to improve their order triaging. And then again, if that works, they roll it out to the next set of branches and so on and so forth. So basically, like a phased approach like this will allow top burgers to gradually move towards a more mature form of AI. It'll allow our team to understand the changes as well, and that's really important. And we talked about that in the people kind of adoption challenges stream, because it'll basically give your team time to become, first of all, accustomed to the changes, and then to provide feedback or raise concerns as they encounter them. So if they spot anything that's not working particularly well, they can raise that to you. And yeah, basically giving your team kind of this chance to tinker with the technology before it's kind of brought out into widespread adoption. It gives them a kind of a sense of ownership and a bit of buy-in, a bit like they have a kind of a stake in the success of this project, which is really important. And then if you act on that feedback, they'll feel even more involved. Like, yeah, I helped shape this project. So that's really important to do if you can do it. And then obviously you're going to have a more robust system at the end of it as well, and because I'm sure your team will have recommended some really good changes. So it's kind of a win-win all around here. And the final phase of kind of any good implementation or rollout strategy for AI is continuous iteration. Okay, you can't simply create these systems once and leave them be. And again, we talked about this in our challenges, and that they do require kind of constant testing and iterations and moderation. So basically, the work here never stops. And yeah, as I said, we talked about some of these before in previous streams, but just to reiterate, you need to constantly test and moderate and update your systems to make sure they're performing as you expect, to make sure that they're delivering customer value, and to make sure that no kind of biases have crept in there. And we talked about some of the risks that can happen when that does happen. It can leave you in kind of a lot of hot water, either legally or operationally. So that's something you really want to do. You also want to constantly kind of engage, retrain, and communicate with your employees. And that communication in particular is really important. Like, obviously, when you're bringing in a new project like this, you want to have a lot of communication up front, but don't just let it lapse once the project has been rolled out. You need to constantly be talking to your team and be open to that communication, two-way communication. You're also going to need to invest in staying on top of regulatory and legal requirements. Again, we discussed how this is a shifting landscape. So you're going to need to kind of continuously invest in these things to make sure you're staying on top of it all and that you're staying compliant. You're also going to want to monitor your success metrics to make sure your project is still headed in the right direction. And ultimately, again, that your project is providing value to your customers. So yeah, it never really stops, but you do have your research phase. Just to summarize, I guess a phased rollout kind of is the best way to go with your AI strategy. You start with your detailed research phase, and again, that's the main emphasis of this stream series, and that's kind of what we're focused on. And then you look into the costs, so you do your cost benefit analysis, and maybe look into the tools involved as well, and maybe the tech stack you're going to use. And then when the time comes to kind of start development, you build each phase of your strategy out incrementally, and you're constantly kind of cycling back to measure each phase against your definition of success and your metrics that you defined earlier on in the project. So what the goal is. And again, the final thing is never fall into the trap of thinking your work is done. As I said, AI systems need to be effective. They need kind of constant moderation and iteration and investment from your team. And you require that kind of constant communication and transparency. So yeah, the work here never stops. It's continuous. You'll be continuously iterating forever with it, but that's how you'll constantly kind of keep improving. So hopefully, if you follow this implementation strategy, kind of including the research from our very first stream in this series to this final one. It should give you the best possible chance of digitally transforming your organization with AI. And so that's it from me, folks. Just like to say again, thanks so much for all of you for following the series, and we really appreciate the interactions and the feedback it's been getting. Well done on making it to the end. I'm glad you were able to stick it out. I really hope it's been useful. If you still have questions or you're looking to kind of harness AI for your own business or your own product, feel free to reach out to myself or any of my colleagues at TopBot. We'd always love to hear from you. And hear what you're planning to build, and if we can give some direction and some pointers, then so much the better. Okay, folks, that's it from me. Thanks very much again for taking the time to join, and all the best with what you're building.